They say the suburbs are quiet, that mornings here belong to coffee cups steaming on porches, birdsong weaving through the trimmed hedges, sprinklers ticking across the neat front lawns. But quiet is a fragile thing. It can be shattered in a single second by the wrong word, the wrong gesture, the wrong person. Mine ended when I saw my wife tumble down the porch stairs, shoved, no kicked by the self-appointed queen of our HOA, and 3 minutes later, before the neighbors had even finished gasping, the thunder of 5 military convoys shook our street to its core. If you're watching this, I want you to think about where you live, your street, your porch, your so-called community, because all it takes is one clipboard tyrant and one ignored warning before order collapses into chaos. Drop your city and your local time in the comments. I want to know how far this story will travel, because believe me, you've never seen an HOA nightmare escalate like this. When Mia, my wife, smiled that morning, I thought it would be one of those rare perfect days. She was arranging a folding table on the porch, soft blue cloth ajar for donations, a tray of cookies she'd baked after her overnight hospital shift. Nothing fancy, just a fundraiser for trauma supplies, the kind she handled every day in the ER. She hummed softly, brushing her hair back, her face lit by the gentle morning sun. To me, she was everything good about this neighborhood, the kindness, the care, the belief that people can be better. But in our neighborhood, kindness was a target. That's when the sound came, the click-clack of designer heels on concrete. I felt my chest tighten before I even saw her, Beverly Kincaid, clipboard in hand, like it was a scepter, sunglasses oversized, enough to hide half her face. She didn't walk, she stormed, and wherever she went, calm evaporated. I knew she'd come for Mia's table the second I heard that rhythm of heels. The way the neighborhood always went quiet when she approached it was like the air braced itself. Unauthorized activity. She snapped, before her foot even touched our porch. She waved the clipboard like it carried the force of law. Section 4.3 prohibits commercial or charitable displays without prior board approval. Mia smiled, ever patient. It's just cookies for the hospital. Beverly, you're welcome to donate. She held out the tray, soft, polite, as if kindness could melt titanium, but Beverly wasn't made of flesh and bone anymore. She was forged out of resentment and petty power. She snapped open a measuring tape with a sharp flick. Too close to the walkway, she muttered, crouching to measure the distance from table to path. Obstruction hazard. Flyers. Non-compliant neighbors began to gather. Some whispered, others lifted their phones. I spotted Tom Wynn across the street, retired Marine, arms crossed, recording with the stillness of a man who'd seen wars but recognized a different kind of battle here. I stepped closer. Beverly, this is ridiculous. Nobody's obstructed, nobody's complaining. Her nostrils flared. Rules are rules. If we allow this, next thing you know, it's garage sales, flea markets, chaos. Chaos, I shot back, is telling an old woman she can't have a ramp because it offends your sightlines. This is goodwill. Her eyes narrowed into slits. She stepped fully onto our porch, invading space she had no right to, perfume sharp as her words. You people think you're above the HOA, but in my community, everyone obeys. That phrase, my community, not ours. Not even Mitch's, the weak president she manipulated like a puppet. Hers, Mia, bless her heart, tried to calm it. Beverly, please, it's one day. It helps the hospital, it helps all of us. But Beverly wasn't here for peace, she was here to dominate. She jabbed her clipboard toward Mia's chest, lips curling into a grin that wasn't joy but victory. Pack it up or face fines. And Mia, tired but strong, said a single word. No, the silence stretched. Then Beverly laughed, a brittle, high-pitched sound, and in one sudden, vicious motion, she lifted her foot and kicked. Time fractured. Mia's eyes widened. The tray of cookies clattered against the wood and her body tilted, arms flailing, before she fell backwards down the steps. The sound of her body hitting the stone walkway, a thud sharp enough to carve itself into my brain, snapped everything inside me in half. Gasps rippled. Someone screamed. Phones shook as neighbors recorded in disbelief. Beverly froze, clipboard still clutched like a shield, as though even she realized she had crossed into something irreversible. I was at Mia's side in seconds, instincts kicking in. Stabilize her neck. Keep her airway clear. Stay with me, sweetheart. You're okay, don't move. My voice was calm, but my hands trembled. Years of drills of triage came back like muscle memory. But under it all, rage boiled. I barked at Mitch, who hovered uselessly nearby. Call 911 now. Then my fingers brushed the sat phone in my pocket, a cold, heavy thing most people would never notice. A device I carried only for one reason. When local systems failed, when the chain of command needed a jolt, when the word emergency wasn't enough. My thumb pressed the recessed button labeled Amber 1 to anyone watching. It looked like another phone call, but I knew better. That ping went straight to the state's emergency operations center. It told them this wasn't a drill anymore. It told them to move. 3 minutes, that's all it took. The first sound was faint, almost like thunder on the horizon. My neighbors thought it was the storm forecasted for later, but I knew it instantly, the deep rhythmic rumble of engines, not one, not 2 dozens, diesel, heavy, unstoppable. The ground began to shake beneath our feet as the first olive-drab Humvee rounded the corner, headlights cutting through morning sun. Behind it, an unbroken line of transport trucks and armored vehicles stretched down the block. 5 convoys, rolling in formation, swallowing our cul-de-sac like Judgment Day on wheels. Phones shot up higher. Gasps turned to silence. For the first time, Beverly's confidence cracked. Her clipboard trembled. What is this?" she stammered, looking around for allies who weren't coming. I squeezed Mia's hand as her shallow breaths steadied. "To help, sir," I whispered. And God, it was. The lead Humvee screeched to a stop at the so-called beautification barrier Beverly had installed across the east entrance. Soldiers spilled out, boots striking pavement in unison, and striding forward, sharp-eyed, sharp-voiced, was Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Wolfe. We had met years ago, in drills where lives were simulated but the stakes still felt real. She didn't hesitate now. She took one look at Mia on the ground, at the illegal gates blocking her convoy, at the clipboard tyrant sputtering nonsense, and her voice cut through the air like a blade. "What happened here?" Deputy Reed, the sheriff's man, jogged in seconds later, already briefed. Assault civilian pushed down the stairs, victim conscious but injured, M's en route. And this gate blocking emergency access. Wolf's eyes flicked to me, then to the sat phone still clipped to my belt. Recognition flashed. "Mercer," she barked. "You activated Amber 1. "Yes, ma'am." "Barriers non-compliant. Warnings ignored." "My wife's down." I wasn't gambling on response times. She gave a curt nod, not approval, not yet, but acknowledgement. Then she turned to her soldiers. "Engineer unit, prep to cut. MPs secure the scene, medics assist EMS." The cul-de-sac shifted in an instant. Soldiers moved like clockwork, hydraulic cutters sparking at the gate. MPs stepped toward Beverly, whose mouth opened in horror as realization spread. The engines roared, the air trembled, and for the first time, everyone saw her for what she really was: not a queen, not a leader, just a petty tyrant standing on the wrong battlefield. The sparks started flying before Beverly could even find her voice. The engineers had unrolled their hydraulic cutters with the efficiency of men who'd rehearsed this 1,000 times. Metal shrieked as the blade bit into the Rottian lock of the illegal barrier. The sound carried across the cul-de-sac like a war cry, sharp and final. Neighbors jumped. Phones zoomed in, and the clipboard queen, who once thought a single citation could terrify an entire block, finally looked small. "Can't, this is private property," she sputtered, waving her clipboard at the soldiers as if it were a shield. "I am the vice president of this HOA and I demand." Colonel Wolfe didn't even glance at her. Her gaze was fixed on the sparks showering from the lock, on the gate, groaning against the inevitable. "Ma'am, you're obstructing a state emergency corridor. Stand aside." But Beverly doubled down. "As always, I will not. This is my street. You answer to me." A ripple of laughter ran through the crowd. Even Tom, recording steadily from across the street, muttered loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Lady, you just tried to order the U.S. Army to check in with your clipboard." The soldiers didn't laugh. They didn't need to. The lock gave way with a final hiss and the gate was forced open, groaning on its hinges until it collapsed inward with a metallic screech. The convoy engines roared to life, and in formation, those olive-drab giants rolled forward. The cul-de-sac trembled as steel reclaimed the emergency route Beverly had blocked. Mia groaned softly, pulling my attention back. The guard medic at her side gave me a steady nod. "Vitals, stable, possible concussion, but she's holding." Relief swelled through me, but it was wrapped in rage. She never should have been hurt in the first place. Sirens incoming, someone called. Moments later, the county EMS ambulance turned into the street, lights flashing, siren fading as it pulled up beside the scene. Paramedics rushed out, conferring quickly with the guard medic. They lifted Mia onto a backboard with practiced care, strapping her neck and ribs. She clutched my hand, squeezing weakly. "I'll be right behind you," I whispered, kissing her forehead before they wheeled her into the rig. She gave me the faintest smile before the doors slammed shut. The ambulance roared away, and my chest ached watching her go. But the battle here wasn't finished. Deputy Reed flicked on his body cam, stepping directly in front of Beverly. "Ma'am, this device is recording. State your full name and your position with the HOA." She raised her chin like a queen awaiting her portrait. "Beverly Kincaid, Vice President of the Rosewood Homeowners Association. And I demand you cease this harassment immediately." Reed's lips twitched, struggling not to laugh. "Noted for the record, witnesses have reported you physically assaulted Mrs. Mia Mercer, resulting in injury. Do you deny this?" Her voice cracked, but she tried to hold her ground. "It was an accident." She tripped. Tom's voice cut through hard and clear. "No accident. I've got the whole thing on video." She kicked her. 6 phones shot up instantly, neighbors replaying the clip in real time. The sharp thud of Beverly's foot, Mia's gasp, the crowd's collective cry. It was all there, looped and slowed and undeniable. Reed leaned closer. "Looks intentional to me." Beverly's face went pale as chalk. Her clipboard sagged in her grip. Meanwhile, Inspector Ramos had crouched by the remains of the gate, snapping photos, muttering violations like a grim litany. No permit, wrong materials, blocking ADA pathway, fire code breach, unlicensed contractor. Worky pulled a tablet from his bag, tapping furiously. Then his brows shot up. Interesting. The official application for this gate lists a contractor named Kincaid Landscaping, spelled almost the same as your last name. He turned the screen toward the crowd. Filed last year, no license on record. Shell company, the neighbors gasped audibly. One mother clapped a hand over her mouth. Tom whistled low. She set up a fake company. That's fraud. Wolf's jaw tightened. So funds meant for HOA maintenance went into a family member's pocket. Ramos nodded grimly. Classic self-dealing. If proven, that's criminal. Beverly shrieked, lunging forward. That's a lie. You're all conspiring against me. But the crowd wasn't listening anymore. Someone shouted, she fined my kid for chalk drawings on the sidewalk. Another yelled, she threatened to remove my Christmas lights. An elderly man shook his cane. She told me my grandson's wheelchair ramp was an eyesore. It was a flood, years of resentment, spilling into the open. For so long people had whispered in kitchens and garages, afraid of the fines, the threats, the letters taped to doors. Now, with soldiers and inspectors standing tall, the fear broke. Voices rose, angry, trembling. Liberated. Mitch, the spineless president, crumbled under the noise. His hands shook as he raised them. I didn't know about the contractor. Beverly said it was decorative. I just signed what she gave me. Save it for the county, Wolf snapped, her voice sharp enough to slice through steel. The clipboard queen turned on him, shrieking, you traitor, don't you dare. But Mitch wasn't finished. For the first time, his voice rose louder than hers. I didn't sign up for this. I thought it was about lawns, about order, not laundering money, not endangering lives. I'm done, Beverly, done. The crowd erupted again, phones filming, neighbors cheering. Some even clapped. Deputy Reed smirked. Looks like the neighborhood finally found its voice. Colonel Wolf folded her arms. And this HOA just found its reckoning. Beverly's face contorted into something beyond rage. She hurled her clipboard to the ground, papers scattering like confetti. She lunged toward me, jabbing a finger in the air. This is your fault. You did this. You brought them here. I met her glare head-on, my voice low and steady. You're right. I did, and I'd do it again. The MPs stepped between us, boots planted, towering like statues. Beverly's shrieks dissolved into wild accusations, lawsuits, conspiracies, shadow plots, but nobody listened. The clipboard that once ruled the street lay crushed beneath a soldier's boot. The convoys rolled slowly through the now cleared corridor, engines growling, reclaiming the neighborhood. Neighbors filmed with trembling hands, their faces caught between awe and relief. For the first time, Beverly's kingdom was exposed for what it really was, paper-thin authority collapsing under the weight of truth, law, and steel. As the roar of the engines faded into a steady hum, I realized the tide had turned. This wasn't just about Mia anymore. This was about every single person Beverly had bullied, every romp she denied, every fine she wrote, every ounce of kindness she tried to crush. And for the first time since moving here, I felt something I hadn't in years. Not victory, not vengeance, something stronger, closure. The ambulance carrying Mia had already vanished down the street, but her presence lingered in every breath I took. My chest still ached with the image of her lying on that stone walkway, neck brace tightening around her throat. I should have been with her, riding in that rig. But I knew I had to stay. What was happening here wasn't just about Mia's injury. It was about stopping a disease that had infected this entire neighborhood. Colonel Wolf's voice cut through the noise. Command post here, MP perimeter engineers. Document the barrier remains. Medics, coordinate with EMS logs. Her orders snapped the scene into place like a battlefield map. Radios crackled, cones appeared. Soldiers moved in a rhythm that only comes from years of drilling chaos into order. Beverly stood in the center of it all, mascara streaking, hair wilting in the sun, still screaming about lawsuits and conspiracies. But this time her voice was swallowed by the low growl of convoy engines idling, by the steady click of cameras capturing her every twitch. Deputy Reed approached her again, calm but relentless. His body cam's red light glowed like a judgment. Flame, ma'am, you are under investigation for assault and obstruction of an emergency corridor. You will remain here until the county attorney issues instructions. I am the HOA, Beverly shrieked, spittle catching on her lips. You people can't dissolve me. I own this street. From the crowd, laughter broke loose. One neighbor muttered, she sounds like she thinks she's a queen. Another said louder, queens don't kick nurses. Phones recorded every word, and for the first time, the people who had lived in fear of her fines turned their mockery on her. Inspector Ramos raised his tablet again. Scrolling through emails Mitch had shakily forwarded minutes earlier in a desperate bid to save himself, Ramos read aloud, his voice steady and damning. Our street, our rules. Outsiders must be slowed or discouraged. Fear keeps people compliant. Signed by Beverly Kincaid. Dated 2 months ago. Gasps rippled. A mother shouted, she fined my daughter for lemonade stands. Another neighbor held up her phone. Here's a letter she sent me, threatening to tow my car because my bumper sticker wasn't community appropriate. The floodgates were open. Every injustice, every whispered story of harassment spilled into daylight. It was no longer just Beverly versus MIT, it was Beverly versus the neighborhood, and the neighborhood had finally found its courage. Colonel Wolfe turned to me. "Mercer, you've got documentation." I nodded and pulled the folder from my go bag. Emails, statutory codes, maps, photos of the gate, time-stamped letters, all of it. I handed it over like ammunition. Wolfe flipped through, her jaw tightening with every page. "They ignored all of this," she muttered. "Every word," I said flatly. She snapped her fingers at an aide. "Scan it forward to county legal and the state office immediately." The aide hustled off, and Wolfe's eyes locked on Beverly again. "Your bylaws don't override state law, ma'am. Obstructing an emergency route is a criminal offense. You're already on record ignoring 3 separate warnings. You're done." Beverly tried to lunge forward again, but an MP stepped into her path, broad chest like a wall of stone. "Ma'am, back behind the perimeter. You can't detain me," she spat. "I'll sue every one of you." Wolfe's eyebrow arched, sharp as a blade. "Not exactly a federal position. Vice president of an HOA." The crowd roared with laughter. Mitch buried his face in his hands. Even a few soldiers cracked smiles, though they quickly turned away. Then came the sound that sealed her fate. Slow-motion playback of the kick, played aloud on multiple neighbor phones at once. The sickening thud of Beverly's shoe connecting with Mia's body, the collective gasp, the scream. The evidence looped in stereo until even Beverly's denial faltered. It was she stumbled, she tried, but the video didn't lie. Deputy Reed didn't flinch. "Ma'am, you'll be facing charges. Assault and obstruction, minimum. Financial fraud investigations pending," Ramos added, "and the city is issuing an emergency order to dissolve this gate immediately. Audit of all HOA expenditures begins today." Beverly spun to Mitch like a drowning woman grabbing a life raft. Tell them I had authority." But Mitch straightened for once, shaking his head. "You pushed us all into it. You wanted control. You said fear keeps people compliant. I'm not going down with you." The crowd erupted, neighbors shouting, some even cheering. Phones captured every angle. For the first time, Beverly's legs wavered. Her heels scraped against the pavement. The clipboard queen was crumbling, but she wasn't finished yet. With a sudden shriek, she dove for her fallen clipboard, snatching up a handful of scattered papers. She waved them like a mad prophet. "You'll regret this, every one of you. I am this community. Without me, you are nothing." Colonel Wolfe stepped forward until their noses were nearly touching. Her voice dropped to a low growl that silenced even the crowd. "You lowered property values the second you assaulted a nurse on her own porch. You endangered lives the second you blocked this corridor. You're finished." The silence after that was heavy, almost sacred. Beverly's mouth opened and closed like a fish pulled from water. She had nothing left. No citations, no power, just paper crumpled in her fists and a street full of people who had stopped believing in her spell. The soldiers began documenting everything. Cameras flashing, drones buzzing overhead. The convoy engines rolled forward in slow, steady rhythm, reclaiming the street as though Beverly had never ruled it. Neighbors whispered to one another, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others grinning in relief. One man muttered, "I've waited 10 years for this day." Another whispered, "She can't find us anymore. It's over." And I stood there, fists clenched, heart pounding, realizing something profound. The clipboard queen had finally lost her crown. But this wasn't just an ending. It was the beginning of something else. Because the real battles don't end with sparks on a gate or soldiers in formation. The real battles are fought in courtrooms, audits, and the quiet paperwork that cuts sharper than steel. And I knew this war wasn't over, it was only changing shape. The convoy engines kept their rhythm, low and steady, as if the whole street had fallen under a new heartbeat. The air smelled of diesel and sparks, the kind of scent that marked the end of one order and the birth of another. Neighbors stood, in clusters, phones raised high, whispering like spectators at some strange trial. And in the middle of it all, Beverly clutched her clipboard scraps like they were holy scripture. "You're all against me," she wailed, voice hoarse, eyes wild. "This is a conspiracy. I built this neighborhood. I am this neighborhood." Nobody moved to comfort her, not even Mitch, especially not Mitch. He had stepped to Deputy Reed's side now, speaking in hushed tones, handing over an envelope thick with papers. Reed's eyes widened as he flipped through. He turned one page toward Ramos, who immediately began snapping photos. "What's that?" I asked, stepping closer. Reed's expression hardened. "Financial records. Looks like your HOA president's been keeping receipts Beverly didn't want anyone to see." The crowd leaned in as Ramos read aloud. "Payments authorized to landscaping. Thousands of dollars, repeated monthly. No permits, no city contracts, no proof of services rendered." He tapped the page. "That's embezzlement if I've ever seen it." Mitch's voice trembled, but it carried. "She told me it was standard maintenance. Said no one would question it. I signed because I was afraid of her." We all were. The neighbors erupted again. A mother shouted, "She fined me for chalk drawings while she stole our dues." An elderly man added, "She threatened to take my porch swing." And Tom, his voice cutting through the clamor, barked, She assaulted a nurse and lined her cousin's pockets. That's who she is. Beverly shrieked, lunging toward Mitch. You spineless traitor. You'll burn with me. But Reed's hand shot up, and two MPs stepped forward in perfect sync. They seized Beverly's arms, firm but controlled, dragging her back behind the perimeter. She kicked and flailed, heels scraping the pavement. You can't do this. I'll sue every one of you. Wolf's voice cracked like a whip. You're already facing assault charges. Fraud and obstruction are next. Keep screaming and we'll add disorderly conduct. The crowd clapped. Some laughed. For the first time, their fear had transformed into something stronger relief. The spell Beverly had cast for years was broken, and once broken, it couldn't return. I stood in the middle of it, my fists tight, heart still aching for Mia, but I couldn't look away. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every single neighbor who had lived under this woman's reign. Watching her dragged back was like watching a tyrant dethroned, not by revolution, but by receipts and body cams. Inspector Ramos crouched again at the barrier remains, speaking more to himself than to anyone else. No permit, ADA violations, shell invoices. This entire structure was a fraud. And worse, it endangered lives. He glanced up at me. You warned them, didn't you? I nodded, 3 times. Ignored every time. Ramos shook his head. Not ignored, buried. Because fear kept people compliant. Those words echoed because I'd read them in Beverly's own email just moments earlier. Fear keeps people compliant. That had been her gospel. And now fear had abandoned her. Soldiers moved with relentless precision. Drones hovered, documenting everything. Engineers cut the last of the barrier into pieces and laid them neatly on the curb. Evidence tagged and bagged. Radios crackled with updates to county legal and the state office. Wolf strode to me, her boots sharp on the pavement. Mercer, your satphone ping is now part of an official incident report. What was supposed to be a drill is now a live case file. Congratulations, you forced a system to pay attention. Her eyes narrowed, but there was respect in her tone. You planned this, didn't you? I didn't flinch. I planned for accountability. The assault, that part wasn't planned, but it proved the point better than anything else. For the first time, the corner of her mouth twitched, almost a smile. Sometimes it takes people like you, people willing to press the button. I let her words settle. Around us, the neighborhood buzzed with new energy. People who had once stayed silent now shouted grievances, trading stories in clusters like survivors piecing together the scope of their ordeal. She'll fine me $200 for leaving my trash cans out 2 hours too long. She said my kid's wheelchair ramp was offensive to the community. She threatened foreclosure over Christmas lights. The more they spoke, the lighter the air felt. As if the weight of years of silence was lifting. Beverly screamed again from behind the MP line. You'll regret this. I'll destroy you all. But nobody listened. Phones stayed pointed at her, recording every shriek. By nightfall, I knew those clips would be viral. Her face, once a mask of authority, would become a meme. And there was no citation in the world that could erase that. Deputy Reed stepped forward, voice calm, body cam still glowing red. Ma'am, you are now officially detained for assault and obstruction. Further charges pending audit results. You will remain in custody until processed by county. The MPs began escorting her toward a waiting sheriff's cruiser. Her heels clattered, clipboard scraps fluttered in the breeze, and her cries grew fainter with every step. You'll all pay, this is my street. No, I thought, not anymore. As the cruiser door slammed and the locks clicked, the crowd exhaled collectively. It was like the street itself had taken its first deep breath in years. Tom clapped me on the shoulder. Jack, you pulled the pin on a grenade and lived to tell the tale. I shook my head. No, we just showed her that fear only works until someone calls its bluff. The convoys remained a while longer, soldiers combing every detail, ensuring the corridor was safe. Colonel Wolf scribbled into her logbook, her jaw set like granite. Inspector Ramos called City Hall, demanding an emergency board hearing and an audit order. Deputy Reed radioed the county attorney's office. It wasn't chaos anymore. It was order, clean and unstoppable. And the neighbors, they were smiling. Smiling in ways I'd never seen before. Not polite masks, not forced small talk, but real, relieved smiles. I stood there in the sun, heart still raw. But I realized something. This wasn't just a takedown, it was a turning point. The clipboard had ruled with silence and fear. But paperwork, unity, and truth had crushed it in broad daylight. And deep down, I knew this neighborhood would never be the same again. The sun was higher now, bright and merciless, throwing long shadows across the cul-de-sac that had just become a battlefield. Soldiers wrapped up their final sweeps, inspectors bagged evidence, and the sheriff's cruiser carrying Beverly disappeared. Down the street, her shouts muffled behind reinforced glass. For the first time since we moved here, the block felt alive. Not afraid, not silent, alive. Neighbors who had once kept their heads down were now leaning on fences, trading stories, voices rising like a chorus finally set free. It was strange to hear the laughter, nervous at first, then swelling. Laughter where once there had only been mutters of fear. One woman waved her phone, showing me the replay of Beverly's kick. It's already online, she said breathlessly. People are sharing it. Thousands of views in minutes. Tom chuckled, his marine stance still rigid but his eyes gleaming. She wanted power. Well, now she's famous. The wrong kind of famous, Deputy Reed scribbled into his log, then looked up at the neighbors. Every one of you is a witness. Every recording helps. County attorney will need your cooperation. But let me be clear, what happened today is enough. She's facing charges. Real charges. Mitch lingered by the edge of the group, shoulders slumped, his voice thin. I never meant for it to go this far. I thought the rules kept us neat, respectable. She said if I didn't sign, I'd be removed. I didn't know how to fight her. For the first time, I almost felt pity, almost. But then I remembered Mia sprawled on the stone walkway, and the pity curdled. You had a choice, I told him quietly. We all do. You chose silence. His face crumpled, and he nodded. I'll testify. I'll hand over everything. Maybe it's late, but I'm done being her puppet. Ramos approached then, holding a printed order freshly faxed from City Hall. He pinned it against the hood of a Humvee and read aloud. Effective immediately. The Rosewood HOA is placed under interim receivership pending full audit. All board members are suspended from authority until further notice. The neighbors erupted, cheers, clapping, even a few tears. It wasn't just words on paper. It was liberation. Wolf closed her logbook with a snap. This corridor will remain under state observation until it's certified clear. Your HOA will no longer dictate access or policy. From here on out, compliance runs one way, upward. She met my eyes, and for a second I saw the flicker of respect she usually reserved for soldiers in her own ranks. Mercer, you didn't just press a button, you pressed the truth into daylight. I gave a tight nod. My throat felt heavy, but I managed. It was never about me. It was about everyone she crushed under that clipboard. The soldiers began packing up. Drones buzzed. Away. The convoys roared once more, moving in formation, rolling down the street with the steady grace of a tide pulling back into the ocean. Neighbors filmed until the last olive truck vanished from view. When the engines faded, the silence that followed wasn't fear anymore, it was peace. But peace doesn't erase pain. I drove straight to the hospital after, following the same corridor the convoys had cleared. Mia lay in a recovery bed, neck brace secured, bruises dark on her skin but her spirit unbroken. She rolled her eyes the second she saw me hovering. Jack, you look worse than I do, she teased, voice raspy but steady. I laughed, though my throat ached. You don't know what it did to me, watching you fall. She reached for my hand, squeezing with surprising strength. I'm tougher than you think, and you kept us safe. Not just me, all of us. Tears stung my eyes, but I let them fall. For once there was no shame in them. The days that followed felt like living in a new neighborhood, though the houses hadn't changed. The people fear had broken, and with it came something better, solidarity within a week. Volunteer crews patched Linda's ramp, repainting it a cheerful blue. Kids chalked rainbows on sidewalks without looking over their shoulders. Tom organized a neighborhood watch, not with clipboards and fines, but with coffee and check-ins. For the first time, our street felt like a community. Mitch resigned formally. A letter taped to the HOA bulletin board in shaky handwriting. I allowed myself to be pressured into decisions that hurt this community. I regret not standing up sooner. It was the first honest thing he had ever written. And Beverly, the last I saw of her was in court, hands cuffed, her lawyer whispering furiously while inspectors laid out violation after violation, auditors reading line after line of fraudulent expenditures. She didn't look like a queen anymore. She looked small. Rumors spread that her cousin's shell company had siphoned off tens of thousands, that her fines had been padded to cover personal expenses, that she had plans to seize properties through bogus liens. Whether all of it was true or not, the damage was enough. Her reign was over, dissolved under the weight of her own greed. The county attorney announced charge assault, obstruction, fraud. If convicted, she'd face restitution, fines, maybe even prison. But honestly, prison wasn't the real punishment. The real punishment was this. Nobody feared her anymore. I sat with Mia on our porch weeks later. The wood still scuffed where the cookie tray had crashed. The ramp gleamed freshly painted. The air felt lighter. She leaned against me, her voice soft. Do you hear it? I tilted my head. Hear what? Nothing, she said, smiling. No heels, no shouting, just quiet. I closed my eyes, listening. Sprinklers ticked. Birds sang. For once the suburbs sounded the way they were supposed to. But deep inside, I carried the memory of that rumble of convoys shaking the earth, the roar of engines that turned fear into ash. To me, that was justice made visible, steel proving what words could not. So if you take anything from this story, let it be this. Bullies thrive on silence. They wield clipboards, bylaws, threats. They pretend paper is iron, but their power is only as strong as the fear we feed them. Document everything. Speak up, find allies. And when the moment comes, don't be afraid to press your version of the Amber 1 button. Because sometimes, all it takes is 3 minutes. Now I want to hear from you. Have you faced an HOA tyrant, a Karen who thought she ruled the world? Drop your story in the comments. Share where you're watching from. Let's see how far this message travels, and remember, accountability isn't revenge, it's protection. It's the engine roar that restores order when pettiness turns dangerous. For us, it started with a kick on a porch, and it ended with 5 military convoys rolling down our street, carrying away a reign of fear in broad daylight.